Okay, there's not very much time before the presidential election. Many are saying that this is the most pivotal election in our lifetime, Democrats and Republicans. To help me go through this and other big stories, I have Brianna Morello. Brianna, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So I'm just looking at the poly markets right now. Donald Trump is still well ahead, 23 points favored on the betting websites. Many polls are showing him up, although it is close. I'm not going to pretend like this isn't a close election. What are your thoughts? I'm starting to get family and friends saying, "Hey, you've got a pulse on this. What's going to happen?" And I honestly tell them, I don't fully know, but I do believe it is trending towards Donald Trump. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I can't believe it's this close of a race. That's where I've always been on all of it. I can't imagine for every American at home, regardless of what your political views are, looking into your wallet and seeing that your dollar doesn't go as far as it used to go, and that not being a deciding factor in all of this. Regardless of your emotions, I think so many people have come forward now and said, I didn't vote for Trump the first 2 years or the first two times he ran up on the ticket. I am now going to be voting for him because I'm tired of all my money just kind of diminishing, and my dollar doesn't go as far. So many people are starting to catch on to that. And then Kamala Harris, when you ask her, see, it's contagious, specific questions about her policies, see, this is going to be a hypocrite. She can't answer them. And that's what's so concerning about all of this. She's grilled all the time. Not even grilled. They nicely give her softball questions in regards to the policies that she's supposed to be implementing if she was president. And this woman can't seem to talk about any of them. And I think that's what's so concerning in all of this is the simple fact that she doesn't really understand how our economy works, foreign policy, and that's just the starters in all of this. So I just don't understand why it is this close. I know the betting markets seem to show a decent gap, but the polls are like a point or two away from one another, and that's concerning.
Yeah, I agree. I thought, oh gosh, this will be like a home run
Yeah.
because, like you say, so many people are concerned about the economy. So many people are concerned about illegal immigration. And then they say, but you know what? I'm okay with that. Let people into the country. I don't think they understand your life has become more expensive
Mhm.
because of out of control spending from Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, and the fact that we have this huge influx of illegal immigrants on top of two wars that they seem to want to support instead of using their diplomatic power and leverage to try to shut down. I'm with you. I still can't believe how close it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And the worst part about it is they're funding both sides of the war, right? Like Democrats, they want to be, because, we've had an alliance with Israel for quite some time, but then they also want to help those on the other side of all of this. And so we're funding both sides of it. That's the part that I find to be problematic. Pick one side. I think it should be Israel at this point, just given the fact that we have been close allies with them for quite some time now. They've been trusted. We've trusted them. They've trusted us. We exchange intel information all the time. So, but if you're going to pick a side, pick one side. The both side thing doesn't work for me, mainly because you're continuing to fund both sides of the war, and maybe that's what they're looking for. Maybe they want to keep this going because it keeps their base interested in what's going on. I just can't imagine why you'd really want this, because it's causing so much devastation and it's heartbreaking in itself. But again, these wars that they have started under their watch didn't start under President Trump. They're continuing to fund them. And I think that's the point that Trump needs to keep driving home to folks is when he was in the White House, Russia was not as aggressive as they are under Democrats. I mean, you looked at what they did under Barack Obama, what they've done under Joe Biden. They're very aggressive when it comes to starting these wars, but they're afraid of Trump. And they like to sit there and pretend like Putin is their ally as well, as Trump's ally. We all know that's not true. And he's even jokingly endorsed Kamala Harris because he's been able to get away with so much under Democrats. And so I just don't understand why so many Americans don't see this.
Yeah, yeah, I don't either. Let me put something back on the screen. This is from Insurrection Barbie. She says Taylor Swift, Beyonce, Meghan Thee Stallion, Lizzo, Usher, Kelly Rowland, Leonardo DiCaprio, Kerry Washington, George Clooney, Oprah, Julia Roberts, Meryl Streep, J-Lo, the military-industrial complex, the Chaneys, Bill Gates, Mark Cuban, the mainstream media, academia, $1 billion in campaign funds, 93% positive coverage in the mainstream media, and yet Donald Trump is still neck and neck, and he's doing better in the betting markets. It then goes on, and Trump is still ahead in the polls, even after 2 impeachments, 94 indictments, 2 assassination attempts, and multiple fake allegations of sexual misconduct. Is this because there is such a difference between the American working class and the elites that try to run the country?
Don't you think it's strange when most Americans find a billionaire more relatable than someone who claims she's from the middle class, but we all know that she is one of the elites? I mean, it's so strange. But yeah, I mean, I think that's what it is. I mean, President Trump had no problem putting on a vest and going out there in the dumpster and just joking, making light of all of it, going behind McDonald's, working the fryer. He's, for some reason, is more relatable than Kamala Harris is. I mean, she would never be able to do any of these things because she's just not authentic. And I think people see through it. So we're entering a very interesting time where we're watching demographics shift away from the Democratic Party ultimately, and they are starting to be a little bit more open-minded and support Trump policies because they're realizing we're not benefiting off of anything that's going on currently right now within the Democratic Party. They're noticing the illegal invasion and the fact that their party has now shifted and is prioritizing those folks. And I think most people are a little upset about it. I think Democrats really burnt themselves when they decided to not have a primary and instead just hand Kamala Harris the nomination. We were talking about it. I had a young woman on my show who's worked with Democrats for quite some time, and she's been in politics for a very long time. And she's no longer supporting them. Just off that alone, she went to the DNC and she expressed how upset she was at the DNC because she watched as they just gave Kamala Harris the nomination without letting anyone step up and try to challenge that. And so everyone kind of fell in line. And then she said my signing off point to Democrats was the Cheney endorsement and how excited they were for that. It's no longer the party that so many people thought they could support. And I think we're watching a massive shift. And I think that's why Democrats are now also pushing more for amnesty and trying to get illegals to be able to vote because they know the American people aren't on their side anymore.
Yeah, they need new people on their side, and they're not from America. You make a great point. Let's get into a deep topic. It's come out now that Facebook and Microsoft were briefed on the Hunter Biden laptop story in 2020. They actively chose to block the story. Of course, they lied to Congress. They misled the American people, saying, we were told that a fake story might be coming out. Now there's a new 82-page report, and the documents show that Facebook purposely chose to block this story in order to help Joe Biden get elected because they might curry favor with the Biden administration. How is this not election interference? Why is Facebook not being held accountable, or is it because it's still the Biden administration?
Yeah, well, Mark Zuckerberg testified in front of Congress and said that he regretted doing the censorship and that it was pressure that came from the intel communities. And so what you just detailed there was a part of the 82 pages, and it shows that Mark Zuckerberg lied. In fact, that he knew that they were just really trying to get favors from the future administration that was probably going to be incoming. And so in writing, they put that there. And so it's very clear, it's very cut as to why they censored the laptop. There was even an email that they ousted in that report that pretty much stated that when they're called to testify in front of Congress, that they will just blame the U.S. government. Now, the interesting part of that is that email was sent prior to the Hunter Biden laptop story being released. That email was sent from a Facebook employee back in July of 2020 when the laptop was released in the fall. I believe it was October of 2020. So how do they know that this was all going to play out, that there was going to be some type of issues with election interference and big tech? Well, they knew ahead of all of this, and they were already working on all of their excuses as to how they were going to justify this. So it's not really surprising, but I think what's happening here is interesting, right? Republicans held this close to the chest, and they're just releasing it now before a major election. Now, sadly, so many people have already voted early or put in their mail-in ballots. And so if this was a deciding factor for them as well, I would say Republicans interfered in our election because they took too long to release this. In fact, I released the report before they did because I got my hands on the report before they made it public. And so for everyone at home right now who's like, oh, we've heard these stories before, Republicans do this to themselves. They sit here and they complain when Democrats interfere in our elections. But given the first opportunity to put this out, what they could have done weeks ago, They decided not to. We've waited over 2 years since they took the gavel to finish and conclude this investigation. And unfortunately, we're only finding the results about a week away from a major presidential election. So I would argue both sides do this all the time. There's no reason why they should have waited this long to release it. And it's a little infuriating if this continues to happen.
Yeah. If you had to guess, Brianna, are the Republicans stupid?
Mm-hmm.
Are they trying to show the people, hey, we did something, we investigated, but it got out late?
Yeah.
Or are they purposely releasing this late because many of them are rhino or anti-Trump and they don't actually want to see him win?
I think it's a mix of both. I think they fear the government coming after them. When you tick off the intel communities, Chuck Schumer told you, they come at you full force. And I think a lot of people are afraid to stick their neck out. Speaker Mike Johnson was a great, great conservative voice inside Congress for us until he took the gavel. Then all of a sudden, he's not as aggressive as we thought he would be. He's supposed to be a constitutional attorney, and he doesn't uphold the Constitution. He had no problem extending FISA and not negotiating much for the American people to help protect our privacy from our government overreach that he's well versed on, because he sat in front of these committee hearings and listened to how the government has targeted Americans over the last few years. And so we're watching this and you're wondering, well, why would Speaker Mike Johnson not put up a fight on any of these issues? He hasn't used the power of the purse, what they told you during midterms they were going to do. They never have done that. They have not withheld any funding, to my knowledge, to kind of negotiate with the White House and with the Senate. And I think that's enraging in itself. We watch time and time again play out. So I think it's a mix of both. I think they're a little afraid. I think they don't want to put their necks out too much. I think, Speaker Mike Johnson, when he was asked about the FISA issue, he pretty much said, I think it was the FBI was the agency that he said when they took him into a back room and showed him some things, that he realized how important FISA was to finding terrorists. And so that's the reason why he was a yes vote on this, and he pushed it forward. But again, that's what was used to target President Trump. And the left has been able to use all of that to weaponize against the American people, their political opponents. And so it's extremely discouraging to continue to see happen. But again, when we have all these people like Speaker Mike Johnson just giving them the green light, what else can you expect?
Yeah. There is a part of me that wonders, that great story going around of Trump reaching out to the head of the Taliban in Afghanistan. And he says, if one more person dies, there's going to be hell to pay. And then he sends him he sends the guy a picture of his own house, right? Yeah. The guy's like, Donald, why are you showing me this? He's like, you'll understand, right? I wonder if the same thing happened, right? Mike Johnson goes into the skiff. He thinks he's getting, briefed on some security thing. It's like, hey, here's a picture of your house. Here's a picture of a bunch of people we took. It's just so strange to me how these people say one thing and then they act in the opposite direction of what people voted them into office for.
Yeah, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene has cited that she thinks that these people are being blackmailed, and that's the reason why they flip so quickly. That's the only likely thing that I think that could be going on right now, right? Because otherwise, I mean, why not go out there and defend the Constitution, defend the American people? But they always fall weak to it. So I think blackmail is like a big issue for a lot of these folks. And maybe it's not something that they've done, their actions, but instead it's others in their life who are close to them that they don't want to see ousted. Democrats for a very long time, I come from the state of New York, and Democrats in New York dominate everything. They dominate all three branches of government. They dominate everything else, local, and it's infuriating, but there's very little pushback. But Democrats are extremely corrupt in New York. There's lots of pay-to-play schemes going on that go unindicted, uninvestigated, and it happens quite often. But then when Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City, decided to speak out on the immigration issue and was very vocal in his opposition on having open borders and allowing these people to come into New York City because he doesn't know who they are, all of a sudden he's indicted for something that happened years ago. And it's a slap on the wrist what they're accusing him of compared to other Democrats like the governor, Kathy Hochul, like Andrew Cuomo. It's a slap on the wrist. It's nothing that's extremely severe. So my thinking behind all of this is that Democrats allow their own to do certain levels of corruption. They go unchallenged until there's an issue and you're not complying, and then they go after you. Andrew Cuomo was forced out due to sexual harassment complaints that were made against him. Now, I lived in New York. I was very familiar with local politics. I was considering a Senate race run. And once I started walking around and trying to figure things out, everyone warned me that, Andrew Cuomo's creep, so just be careful. And I was going to run as Republican, but they pretty much said, Just be careful. That was years ago. Okay. They all knew what Andrew Cuomo was capable of, but they held it close to their chest. No one said anything about it until the nursing home scandal became too big to cover up. And so many other Democrats were involved in it, like Governor Gretchen Whitmer and all these other governors, because they were all intentionally putting COVID positive patients in nursing homes. And sadly, so many elderly Americans passed away because of this policy. And it was the only consistency we knew from the very beginning, is to protect the elderly. And they all intentionally didn't do so. So my point in all of this is, they used the sexual harassment as a scapegoat on Andrew Cuomo. Had so many women coming out, piling up all the accusations against him, which I don't think are false, but it was ignored for so many years until it was politically convenient for them to drop it. So that's what I think is going on here. I just think across the board, Democrats are corrupt, but you can only get to a certain point. And if you don't comply anymore, or they can no longer protect you because it's getting so bad, they'll throw you under the bus for something that doesn't bring them all down.
Yeah, no, I think you're correct. In fact, some breaking news. Andrew Cuomo, Congress just referred him to the Department of Justice for criminal charges for the 10,000 plus seniors that died under his stupid COVID restrictions. Why on earth would you send people with COVID to live with 80, 90-year-old women in a nursing home? I hope he reaps the wrath of that stupid decision. I want to stay on the COVID topic with you, Brianna. I read on your bio on Twitter, on X, that you quit a good Fox News job over not wanting to get this experimental miracle vaccine. You and I didn't talk about this. Are you okay just like
Yeah.
briefly telling me about that?
Yeah, so I detailed it actually all, and I think we should be transparent, because I think it's important for folks at home to understand what's going on in the media world. I worked at Fox Corp. I worked there back in 2018, left, came back in 2021, was working remotely. I was a booking producer for people like Maria Bartiromo, her weekend show, and then there was a couple of other shows that I was helping out and working on as well. I was informed, I was asked to go back to New York, and it was a requirement upon coming back to Fox. But I was told that if I come back to New York City, that they were going to put me on Tucker Carlson's show as soon as a producer, as soon as a slot opened. So I was okay with all of this. Fox was harassing me to get my vaccination status while I was remote in Florida. I was reluctant. I think I ignored 5 emails until I got an email from the CEO, Suzanne Scott. That's when I had to disclose my status and to let them know that I'm not vaccinated. And they assured me that this was all about seating arrangements. So they were looking to potentially seat the unvaccinated somewhere else in the building, not next to the vaccinated, because their vaccines work, of course. So ongoing with all of that, I ended up moving back to New York City. And the day I took off to physically move my things in with movers, I got an email forwarded to me. It was an email that was withheld from me. And it was telling me that they're complying with the New York City private vaccine mandate, and that I had to either get the vaccine by a certain date or I was going to be put on unpaid leave. I called an executive to see what was going on. He tells me that, yes, that email, sorry, you didn't get it sooner. You should have received that email. It was sent out, I believe it was a week before I physically moved, because I would have never moved to New York City if I got that email prior. I would have canceled everything. And he pretty much told me you could apply for exemption, but an exemption is complying. If you're complying and you're asking your employer for permission, if you're religious enough, or if your medical history is good for on their side for them to approve it. And quite frankly, that's a violation of your rights. You shouldn't disclose that information to them anyway. So instead, I sent off a nasty resignation email to Human Resources after battling it out with them for a couple of weeks back and forth. And I left. And it's been the best thing for me, because I'm now working independently. I'm having my own show, and I'm doing all these stories that normally wouldn't make it onto their network. So it's been great. But fast forward, we found out that Fox News, with all these major media outlets, took a lot of money from HHS. And that's what really resulted in why we couldn't be critical of the vaccines when we were on air. And when I was there for one of the shows I was working on, not Maria's show, but it was a different show, they edited out a part where Peter Navarro said, if you're young and healthy, don't get the vaccines because you don't know the long-term effects. Well, that resulted in that part getting removed and deleted from the interview, and it didn't make it to air. And so there was multiple examples of them trying to censor things like criticism on air about it. And I just think people need to be more they need to be more well aware. Big pharma is a very, very big industry. They fund a lot of these things. And I don't think we should be quiet about these issues. I think we've got to speak up. And for everyone who was quiet, I had a lot of colleagues who were sending me messages on the side and telling me, this is great that you're doing that. but I'm also like, you could do it too. You could speak out, because right now it's just me talking about it. And Fox was trying to use their on-air folks at Fox and Friends to deny my reporting on my own story. And they were just like, no, we still want to work in media. So there's just different tiers of all of this. It's disappointing, but you gotta stick up for yourself, and you can't sit there and let these big corporations come after you.
Yeah. I also did not get it, but I was, lucky enough to already be independent. But Pfizer approached me and asked me to tell everyone to get this experimental, brand new, medical technology injected into their body, and they offered me $30,000.
Yeah.
That I know people that don't make $30,000 a year. They offered me that for 30 seconds of work. $30,000. I told them to shove it up their butts and get out of my life. Like, why would I tell them? Why would I tell people to go out and get this experimental thing? In our final minutes together, though, I'm sure you saw this. It was trending over on Twitter, but the Idaho Health Board has become the first state to vote to remove COVID shots. They say they are unsafe and should not be promoted. Earlier this year, Surgeon General of Florida told people not to get these shots, that they pose more of a danger than a benefit. And then Dr. Brian Hooker testified to Congress that for every shot children get, almost 30 of them die. Therefore, it's a 30-to-1 ratio that these are dangerous. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, they pushed this onto the American people without any testing involved in it. They even did it to pregnant women as well, told them that it was safe and effective and it wouldn't affect their newborn babies. And well, fast forward, we know they were lying because they didn't have the data to back it up, but they were able to withhold it for quite some time. And that's the part that's so concerning about all of this. So many people got in front of the camera and told the American people to get it, that it was okay. I remember watching a press conference for an outlet that I was working for, and Andrew Cuomo was just telling the people in the Black community in Harlem to just roll up their sleeve. And then he had a pastor on stage, just roll up your sleeve, don't ask any questions. Well, if you're familiar with how Black Americans were treated back in the day in regards to experiments being done on them, you would tell them not to do that. They're actually the reason why I don't participate in these things, because I know what happened to them and how our own government was okay with running experiments on human beings without their agreement to any of this. So it's discouraging, but I'm glad there's a few individuals who are bold enough to come out and say something about this. So many doctors were afraid of losing their licenses or to being suspended or being dragged out in front of their medical boards because they challenge any of this. But there's so many issues with it. I mean, we won't even ever really know how many people were injured because a lot of these hospitals are refusing to fill out the VAERS report, which document injuries related to vaccines. But they don't want to fill it out because they don't want Big Pharma coming after them. And that's what they're dealing with right now. So I think the last time I looked, there was a couple of million of people injured and a couple of million VAERS reports. But ultimately, it's probably significantly higher because there's so many people who I know who are dealing with the vaccine injuries, and it's going unreported because their doctors don't want to get involved. So it's all sad. It's all disappointing, but you can't trust even your own doctors. I think that's what this all proves.
Yeah. I know you got to get on to your own show. I'll just end with this. Bill Gates has been indicted, and he's going to be forced to go to the Netherlands for lying to the people of the Netherlands and all of the death and damage that has happened. At the same time, Bill Gates magically donated $50 million to Kamala Harris, probably hoping that if she wins, she will block him from being forced to the Netherlands. I look forward to seeing the outcome of that one. Brianna, if people want to follow you online, where can I push them towards?
Yeah, so we've got my show streams on Rumble and on Twitter. So you could just look me up, Brianna Morello. It's BreannaMorello.
Okay, I will put that down below. Thank you so much for coming on. It was so nice to meet you. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Stephen. You too.